So just recently now there has been another case of fraud. So this here says in a bombshell revelation, U.S. Attorney Bill Saley just exposed that California Democrat officials oversaw massive homelessness fraud. It has resulted in millions of dollars worth of fraudulent spending, billions of California tax dollars intended to solve homelessness. And you know what happened? So this started a few years ago. They're going to fix homelessness by throwing a bunch of money at it. And in California's standard way of doing things, they actually increased the number of homelessness after they spent billions of dollars fixing it. Does this make any sense to anybody? Why do we keep giving these politicians so much money? They don't actually accomplish anything. Which reminds me, the government's been shut down now for a couple weeks. How has anybody's life even been affected other than the people who work for the federal government? You know, how is it that we still have roads to drive on? How is it that there's still gas in my car? How is it that my car still runs and my house and the heating and the air conditioning and the windows still work and I still have food in my fridge and the grocery stores still have food? How is that possible with the government being shut down? Right? So it's kind of it points out a lot that it's all kind of just a sham. They want to act like the government's a lot more important than what it is, the federal government. Now, local government, state government, that's much more important. That does have an immediate effect quickly. The federal government, though, half of what they do is just waste money on stupid shit and get rich doing it. So let's watch this clip here and about the mismanagement of funds in California when the homelessness. It's just asinine.
Of where billions of California tax dollars intended to solve homelessness ended up. California has spent more than $24 billion over the last 5 years with little to no progress in solving our homelessness epidemic. California state officials failed to provide meaningful oversight over the individuals who received most of these funds, and they had little to no answers to the public's demand for accountability. Well, that accountability starts today. Today, we are announcing significant developments into our investigation. We're making public 2 criminal cases relating to 2 separate real estate developers who were involved in misappropriating millions of state funds intended to combat homelessness. This morning, federal agents arrested Cody Holmes, a 31-year-old Beverly Hills resident and the former CFO of Shangri-La Industries, a downtown LA-based developer of affordable housing, for defrauding the Home Key program that is administered by the state of California. The program awarded grant money, which included federal tax dollars, for specific projects to convert motels into housing for the homeless and to operate the units. By April of 2022, Shangri-La Industries, where Holmes was the CFO, had co-applied with multiple California cities to convert numerous properties in California, including a location in Thousand Oaks. The state asked for proof that the company had the financial capacity to build all the projects. In response, Holmes and Shangri-La knowingly submitted fake bank statements which claimed to show that developer had about $160 million on deposit. Not only were the bank statements fake, our investigation shows that Shangri-La and its affiliates had nowhere near the amount of money they claimed they had in the fake bank statements.
So this is just the developer portion of it. So, okay, $24 billion gone, homelessness increased. This is only a few $1 million of it. Where in the world is all this money? Where does it go? What did it get spent on? I mean, how do you spend billions of dollars and not get anything done? You know, you can only spend so much money on surveys and, environmental studies and things like that. How do you spend billions of dollars? Where does it go? I don't get it. And one of the things that Gavin Newsom likes to say is that California is a net positive taxpayer, so they pay in more federal tax than they receive from the federal government. I cannot that cannot possibly be true. I know that there's stats that show that. I guarantee you that something is not being included in those stats. Something like NGOs, where they siphon the money from an NGO that's in Arizona or Washington D.C., and the money goes to an NGO that's in California, and they're just pumping this money right back into them, and then they're wasting it, giving it away to their friends who run these NGOs and nonprofits, who get paid $700,000 a year to run a nonprofit that has no employees and never accomplishes anything. And this is the government that everybody's so concerned about opening back up. Why? Because their friends are missing out on their paychecks. How is everybody not up in an outrage over how disrespectful they are with all of the money that they spend? And it's nobody's watching over these people. There's going to get two developers are going to get in trouble for $20 million worth of fraud, and then the other $23 billion worth of fraud is nothing. Gavin Newsom's not going to do anything about it. He's not going to look into it. He's not going to even care. So this is just one little instance. I mean, this is massive instance, but this is not an isolated thing. This has been coming up more and more and more. But it just here, let me read this list. This is just from key cases from 2024 and 2025. So this is like a year's worth of Democrat fraud. California homelessness audit, that's this one right here, $24 billion. California Key Home grant fraud, millions misused in millions more misused in homelessness funding. New York PPE procurement, millions in kickbacks and contracts fraud that's been charged. New York medical transport / Medicare fraud, or $700,000 in false billing. New York shelter construction contracts, $12 million in fraud. New York City nonprofit vendor fraud, multiple cases, millions in fraud. Minnesota feeding our future. This is the one where there was like all Somalis involved in it. $250 million in COVID nutrition fund fraud, and they've been convicted. Now, where did all that money go? How much of that money went into Ilhan Omar's coffers? I guarantee you some of it had to. How does she get $30 million net worth? Minnesota Housing Stabilization Services, $8 million in fraudulent claims. Minnesota Autism Clinic, $14 million. Minnesota aggregate exposure, possibly $1 billion plus across all the programs. $1 billion of fraud. Minnesota is turned into a cesspool, a third world banana republic nonsense. They are just throwing money away like crazy. There is no way this is sustainable. The normal people who live outside of Minneapolis need to take over control of Minnesota again. You got these crazy nut jobs like Tim Walz, who has no qualifications and no talents whatsoever. He's overseeing all this massive fraud. I don't think he's implicated in it. I don't think that he's probably getting rich off of this. I think he's just such a moron with such a he has the what do they call that, sort of like this empathy, this compassion that just like allows everybody to take advantage of you, and you still get to feel like a good person because you're not actually holding anybody accountable. You're not enforcing rules. You're not doing any of that kind of stuff. And so he can pat himself on the back for being a good guy because he's not angry and he's not mad and he's not, but he's wasting everybody's money. I never will understand the Democrat propensity to protect people doing the wrong things and then think it's wrong to help the people doing the right things, right? So like there's lots of victims in this scenario, all the people who paid the money in. And yet he won't hold anybody accountable, and he won't make sure that there's the accountability offices and oversight committees and that they're doing their jobs and that they're not being fraudulent, because that would be mean. That would be authoritarian. That would be a bad thing to make sure that all these taxpayers don't become victims. They don't see it that way though. They don't see that if we convict this guy gets convicted of 13 crimes. This guy gets convicted of 33 felonies and crimes and breaking and entering and all this kind of stuff. They don't see it as, well, what about all those victims that was entailed? They think about the criminal and say, well, oh, we should be really nice to him because this was bad. It was his upbringing. It was his family. It was his whatever excuse they have. And they just let him back out on the street. Then he stabs somebody or robs somebody or shoots somebody, kills somebody, rapes a kid, and they don't ever think about the person who's getting raped, the person who's getting killed. Their sole focus is on the criminal and how they can best serve that guy. But that guy isn't the one who put him in office. That guy is not the one who needs protection. It's all the innocent people out there. It's like Brandon Johnson and these moron idiots in Illinois, and they're fighting so hard to keep criminals on the streets in Chicago. Why? Then you talk to the normal people who are out here trying to live their lives, trying to go to the jobs, trying to go to the corner store and get their eggs, and they're scared they're going to get shot. And Brandon Johnson and Pritzker, they don't give a damn about those people. They care about the hooligans, the 1% that's terrorizing the community, and they go to any length possible to protect that person. Why? Why do they do this? Why do they allow this massive fraud? Because they're not willing to actually hold anybody accountable or have oversight or enforce the rules. Why do they allow criminals who've been arrested dozens of times, that are violent, back out on the street? Because and I think it's just a fake concept that they don't even believe, but because policing's racist or something stupid like that, they don't believe that. But they believe in letting these people back out on the streets to terrorize people, and it's a guarantee that these people are going to commit another crime, and it doesn't matter to them. What is with that? Why are they so hateful of people who are following the laws, obeying the rules, trying to live their lives? They want those people to be terrorized. They want those people to live in fear every day. Can somebody call in and make this make sense to me? I don't understand how this makes sense to these idiots. Because when I think about it, instantly I think about the victims. I think, well, of course we don't want to let this guy out on the street who's already broken into 7 homes and stabbed 12 people. We don't want another person stabbed, right? We don't want those elements in our communities to where they're causing instability, to where they're making companies leave from these areas, these already primarily poor areas. So more jobs eliminated because you don't want to lock people up for constantly stealing and constantly breaking and constantly robbing and shooting. Somebody make it make sense. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't think they're quite smart enough to think that if we let them out there, they're going to cause civil unrest, and then somehow that's going to help us take power. I don't know if I don't really see that as the case either. I think it's just this weird, misplaced compassion to where they're like the worst parent in the world who just lets their kids do whatever they want because it would make them a meanie parent to actually enforce any rules or curfews or bedtimes or any of that kind of stuff. And then their kids just end up to be these rotten, terrible, can't stand people. And that's what happens to these cities because that's their governing methodology. You know, they think, well, if we're nice, then the person will turn out nice. That's not how this works. And this is why nobody with a sense of care and concern for law and law enforcement and keeping people safe, none of those people are going to stay in the Democratic Party. They're fleeing, they're running over to the Republicans because the Democrats call enforcing the laws authoritarian, fascist, Hitler. All we're doing is just enforcing the law. That's it. A guy shoots somebody, a guy robs something, a guy steals something, he goes to prison. That's the law. And then all these cities they let these guys out with an IOU. You know, sign this paper, sir, that says you'll return on Thursday at 10 a.m. And of course, they never show up. Why would they? Well, and then they go and commit another crime. They get arrested, and they're like, "Now, hey, you said you were going to show up, so here, sign this paper and say that you're going to show up on next Tuesday at 11 a.m." And then they never show up. I mean, it's ridiculous. So let's look at some more of these. That was hardly even the whole list. So we got Illinois healthcare fraud. This was a national takedown. It was over $2 billion of schemes in Illinois. Is that crazy? These are just over the last 2 years. There's Illinois Medicare testing scheme, $227 million of fraud. DC nonprofit grant misuse, about $250,000 of fraud. Washington State Homelessness Authority audit. Oregon Emergency Rental Assistance, $426 million program, about $37 million in fraud. Charlotte, North Carolina, Cedric Dean Medicaid scheme, $9 million in fraud. Fargo, North Dakota, $440,000 in fraud. You know, it just goes on and on. Michigan, Dr. Sophia Toya Medicare fraud, $6 million. Michigan Home Health Agency false billing, $7.9 million. Michigan pandemic mail theft ring, $63 million. Nursing home settlement in Michigan, $4.5 million. So it's just over and over and over and over again. It's just crazy. I mean, this is where our money's going when it's not being siphoned into, you know, transgender dance classes in Tanzania or circumcisions in, you know, the region of Zambia or some stupid shit. You know, billions of money getting spent on that stuff. And you think for a second that there's not friends of these politicians who've set up NGOs in all those countries where they're sending this stupid money? Then none of this money is going where it's supposed to go. It's not going to any of this stuff. It's going into corrupt people's pockets. And that's why it's getting shut down. Finally, somebody's in charge who's going to actually take this stuff seriously. Who knows how many trillions of dollars have just been given away and nothing has been accomplished as a result. I mean, why do somebody call in and tell me, maybe you can explain this to me. Why do Democrats, why do they have such an easy time lying, cheating, and stealing, defrauding? Why do they have such an easy time letting criminals back onto the streets to wreak mayhem?